think the absentee ballots, when people can't make it, is that a solution?
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't think you're going to be in a city, how are the numbers on absentee ballots over the last decade?
Oh, we've had, it's increasing. But we have very strict rules on absentee ballots in Connecticut, which make a lot of sense in a way, because in Connecticut, it's in our state constitution that you can only get an absentee ballot with very limited reasons. And one of them is if you're going to be absent from the jurisdiction from early in the morning to late at night. Now, truthfully, the numbers have been growing. We're up to like 10% now, I think, of all ballots cast.
What are the chances of augmenting that during the session, this session, where they can look at that for people that have 3 or 4 reasons? I've seen them before. I voted absentee before. And
yeah.
It looks like you're signing an affidavit that you're really,
yes.
You're not, you're going to be out of state, you're at the doctor.
Right.
It seems strict for people that have...
Yeah, it is. I think it's probably too strict, but it's in the state constitution. Actually, there will be a constitutional amendment on the ballot this year that was passed last year. See, it's a long process, but I think we have a chance of getting a change to that might, but the legislature would still have to vote in whatever new system we have. Right now, it's a pretty complicated system because there have been allegations of fraud. We're very, very careful. Each one has a number. It has to be counted by hand. So it's pretty cumbersome. We'd have to do something about that system, and it might cost more money. So I'd be careful of that.
So this election cycle, that won't happen, where the absentee ballots can have an expanded reason for why you're voting absentee.
People will vote. It will be voted on this November by everyone, not just the legislature.
But it won't affect this election.
No, it won't affect this election. It's too late. We can't do it for this election. Yes.
Yeah, Denise, I'm very interested in what Lucas had to say about the feeling of not being part of the process. And I wonder whether that is because we have a multicultural culture attitude to this country rather than a blending of the culture into an American culture. So we have created pockets of communities that don't blend the way they did in the 40s and 50s post-World War II.
I don't know. I tend to think, my own private view is I think we have neglected civic education because it's not just new immigrants that are feeling like that. It's what I'm mostly worried about is the new generation. And when I say that, I mean people under 35, not just really young people. And there has been a real lack of the civic education that I got in school. It's gone almost now because it's not on the test. And so I've already actually gone to the State Board of Education to talk to them about this, because in my day, you learned about government and voting and stuff in the 4th grade, right? 4th, 5th grade, something like that. You'd go visit the state capitol, all that stuff. That is disappearing from school. And it's something I think a lot of people our age don't understand because we think it's the same way as it was when we were there.
And just as to add to that comment, I'm also a history teacher for profession. I know that the state is really pushing for more skill-based than content-based with the new Common Core, but you see an emphasis a lot more in what they can do, and sometimes you do lose some of those things. I mean, we do feel the pressure to get rid of a lot of that content, especially civics and things that are not as core to the education as it used to be. But traditionally, most immigrant groups that first came felt like this. I think we are the newest group. So when you are first generation, usually you see people get a lot more involved. So the scary part is when the second generation doesn't start getting involved, it becomes something that is permanent. But historically, most groups that just arrive do have that transition period to assimilate.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think back to, I grew up in California, as I told you, just south of San Francisco. And my town, when I grew up there, was all Irish, Catholic, and Italian. Almost the whole town. My father, in the dry cleaning business, but then the hardware store was owned by Mr. Scallion. And it was just it was very unusual anybody else. I had one Asian girl in my high school graduating class of about 400 kids. So it was a big school. I go back to my town now. My town is called Millbrae, California. It's right by where the airport is, if anybody's been in San Francisco. And I go downtown where my father's store was. Everything is in Chinese. Everything. I go to my old high school, 10% white, 80% Asian, 10% something else. So it's the way of the country, and it's shocking. It's hard for me, honestly, because it's different. You know, it's not the place I grew up, but it's another wave, and they're coming through. You know, and they're making their own impacts. And I don't know where all the Irish and Italian have gone. Maybe they all came to Connecticut. I don't know, but it's interesting that there was. I mean, with that, but we were all from somewhere else, and I remember many of my friends' parents did not speak English; they spoke Italian. And they still did things the Italian way and ate Italian food and closed the drapes and put plastic on the furniture and all the things they did in the Mediterranean. And, you know, that's all changed. So I don't know, but I do feel that there was a much stronger curriculum in civic education in the 1950s for the Italian kids, for the Irish kids, and for everybody. So I'm not sure. I don't think we're doing a very good job, though, of assimilating people the way we did in the 1950s. And in that sense, I totally agree with you. Yeah. Yes.
So if we know that, how do we fix it? How do we include the civic education on class schools? I mean, how do we do it?
Well, I can tell you I'm fighting for it right now. I have been to the State Board of Education. There will be an initiative introduced by the commissioner, which I hope gets support, that will increase civic education. When I was in the legislature, which was before I was Secretary of State, I did get a law passed in 2003 that would implement a required course in civics before you graduate high school for every student in Connecticut. Now, I'm still not sure what's getting taught in that course or what's happening. Maybe you can tell me, you're a history teacher. Is that happening now?
There is a requirement for one of the years. In at least 10th grade, they have to have a civic class. But
So I did something, I
then they
guess.
demand to be skill-based civic class. So
Yeah, right. I mean, it is how one teaches these things as well. But you know, I mean, I don't think any of this is really new, but it needs reinforcing in a different way. And it's up to the people coming in to get involved. And that's the hard part. If you're from a different culture, I think it's very intimidating. Because maybe you don't know the language so well, maybe you don't know how these things work, you don't know how to join a town committee. What's a town committee? What's the Democratic Party? What's the Republican Party? What's any party? It might be very different than what you're used to. But that's what we have to get the education about. People have to understand how the system works and how to get into it. Mostly I have found many people get interested because of their kids. It's a very common way for people like me. That's how I got into politics. Because you care about your children, and everybody seems to care about the education their children are getting, and that's where a lot of people get involved. But you have to have a group of people, it can't just be one person.